Hey everyone, and welcome back. So, have you ever listened to a track, maybe just a guitar or vocal, and thought, wow, that just sounds bigger,
Yeah.
more alive, somehow more present, but you can't really put your finger on why? It's not like an obvious echo or a heavy swirl. It's something subtle, almost invisible, right?
Yeah.
But it makes all the difference. Well, today we're doing a deep dive into a couple of legends known for exactly that kind of magic. The Roland Dimension D, the SDD 320 rack unit.
The classic studio piece, yeah.
Exactly. And its little sibling, the Boss DC2 Dimension C pedal. These things, they aren't your typical chorus pedals, not at all.
Definitely carved their own niche.
They created what people lovingly call the invisible chorus. So our plan today is to unpack the story behind these, the history, the clever design.
Deceptively simple design, really.
Right. And their kind of surprising impact. We want to see how these units, which maybe flew under the radar at first, became these go-to tools for getting that huge elusive sound without, sounding affected.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey. And it really starts back in 1979. You got to remember, Roland, through Boss, already had hits with the CE1, the CE2.
So those really popular swirly choruses.
Exactly. Those were everywhere, defined that chorus sound for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then Roland comes out with the Dimension D rack unit, the SDD 320, and it's totally different.
Different how, though? What was the core idea, if not that swirl?
The core idea was subtlety, extreme subtlety almost. It wasn't about obvious modulation, that sort of warble you get with standard chorus. Instead, the Dimension D was designed to give you this incredibly smooth, spacious thickening. It makes things sound bigger, wider, adds depth.
But you don't immediately go, chorus.
Precisely. It was meant to be transparent hi-fi. You almost didn't notice it was on, but you definitely noticed when you turned it off. It just made the source sound better, more polished, more three-dimensional.
Okay, so it's less about adding a flavor and more about enhancing the core sound, making it just sit better in the mix.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It was about spatial enhancement without coloration, and that made it incredibly versatile.
Right, because you mentioned earlier it wasn't just for guitars.
Oh, absolutely not. Studios use it on everything. Vocals, bass, keyboards, synth pads, even sometimes across drum buses or full mixes.
Wow, okay. So a real studio workhorse.
Definitely. And part of that appeal, beyond the sound, was the circuitry and, interestingly, its simplicity. Under the hood, the Dimension D was a stereo analog chorus. You'd use Bucket Brigade delay chips, BBDs.
The classic analog delay tech. Gives it that warmth, right?
Exactly. BBDs pass the signal along this chain of capacitors, creating this short, inherently warm kind of dark delay. That's key to the smooth modulation. No harsh digital artifacts. But the interface was the real stroke of genius, maybe, instead of knobs for rate and depth like every other chorus.
Yeah. What did it have?
Just 4 push buttons. That's it. Each button selected a different preset, a slightly different subtle variation of the effect.
4 buttons, no tweaking.
Nope. Set and forget. Which sounds limiting, but it became legendary. You just pushed a button and it sounded good, instantly. No fuss.
That is kind of brilliant. Takes the guesswork out. And then Boss, which is Roland's pedal company, they decided to bring that idea to guitarists' feet.
Yep. In 1985, they released the Boss DC2 Dimension C. The goal was basically to capture that Dimension D magic, those algorithms, in their standard compact pedal format.
And did it keep the button thing?
It did. Same deal. 4 push buttons, no knobs, pure simplicity again. And just like the rack unit, that fixed control scheme, it was part of the charm. Plus, players eventually figured out you could press combinations of buttons. So like button 1 and 3 or 2 and 4.
Oh, so you could get more than just the 4 sounds.
Exactly. There were these hidden modes, which added a bit more flexibility to its seemingly simple design. People love discovering those.
Okay, so you've got this amazing sound. First in the expensive rack, now in a pedal. You'd think the DC2 had flown off the shelves.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But that's not quite what happened. It's a bit of an underdog story, actually.
Really? It wasn't a hit.
Not initially, no. It wasn't a huge seller at all. Boss actually discontinued it in 1989, only about 4 years after it came out.
Wow. Why do you think that was? Too subtle for the time, maybe? The 80s had some pretty wild effects.
That's probably a big part of it, yeah. You had massive reverb, crazy flangers, super lush choruses. The Dimension C was maybe too understated for the mainstream vibe then.
Yeah.
Didn't scream effect.
But like a lot of things, people caught on eventually.
Oh, absolutely. Its reputation just grew and grew over time, kind of quietly at first. Players started rediscovering it, especially as they realized it was basically the Dimension D sound in a box.
The connection to the legendary rack unit became key.
Totally. Once people made that link, and his taste maybe shifted towards more nuanced sounds in the 90s and 2000s, the DC2 became the pedal to get for that effect,
Yeah.
which, led to its prices on the used market going, well, pretty crazy. It became one of the most sought-after, most expensive vintage Boss pedals out there, from discontinued to cult classic.
A familiar story in the gear world. So who were some of the artists or producers associated with this Dimension sound? Any big names jumped out?
Yeah, quite a few, known for really caring about their tone. Brian Eno was a big user of the Dimension D rack, especially for his ambient work. It was perfect for adding that space without clutter.
Makes sense for ambient.
Definitely. INXS used it quite a bit, apparently on guitars, but also vocal sometimes, giving things a sheen. Studio legends like Steely Dan, Talking Heads, they relied heavily on the Dimension D in the studio.
High standards there.
Absolutely. And then guitarists like John Frusciante from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, he's known for using the DC2 pedal for subtle width and making parts feel bigger without obvious modulation. And beyond specific artists, you have to remember the producers in the 80s. The Dimension D rack became like a secret weapon.
Just sprinkling it on everything.
Pretty much. Vocals, keys, drums, you name it. Sometimes even running the whole mix through it very subtly just to get at that final polish and stereo spread. It wasn't an effect so much as a make it sound better box.
That's the invisible chorus idea perfectly illustrated, isn't it? It just enhances the recording itself.
Exactly. It doesn't sound processed. It just sounds wider, deeper, more professional.
Okay, so decades go by. The DC2 is this rare, expensive vintage piece, but then Boss finally decided to bring it back.
Yes. Huge news in the pedal world back in 2018. They reissued the Dimension C as part of their premium Wazacraft line, the DC2W.
Ah, the Wazacraft stuff. They really take care with those reissues.
They really do. And the anticipation for the DC2W was massive. People had wanted a proper reissue for years.
So was it just a straight copy, or did they add anything new?
They actually did more than just copy it, which was smart. The DC2W gives you both the original DC2 pedal sound and the sound of the original SDD 320 Dimension D rack unit, the little switch.
Oh, that's cool. So you get both flavors.
Yeah. And they expanded the options. Instead of just the 4 buttons, the Waza version cleverly uses the same 4 buttons, but allows access to 8 variations in total across the 2 modes. So, more sonic options.
Nice. More flexibility.
And crucially, they added proper stereo inputs and outputs, which the original pedal didn't have, so you can run it in true stereo, which is huge for this kind of spatial effect.
That makes it way more useful for modern setups, studios, keyboard players.
Exactly. It was a really thoughtful reissue. It captured the magic, but made it more practical.
Yeah.
And yeah, people loved it. It's considered one of the best Waza releases.
It sounds like they really understood what made it special. Bringing back that elusive, bigger-than-life sound without messing it up, just making things sound better.
That's the essence of it. Pure and simple enhancement.
So wrapping this up, it feels like the Roland Dimension D and the Boss DC2 really occupy this unique space in effects history, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Totally separate from the usual chorus crowd.
Yeah, they kind of prove that sometimes the biggest impact is the one you don't obviously hear, that focus on subtle depth, that stereo width, instead of, obvious modulation. It set a different kind of standard.
It really did. It showed the power of just making the source sound fundamentally bigger and more present. The elegance of subtlety,
Yeah, exactly. The invisible chorus really sums it up. It wasn't shouting for attention. It was just quietly making everything sound richer, more spacious.
A testament to clever design and understanding what musicians really need sometimes.
Which brings us to a final thought for you listening. In a world that often seems to value the loud, the dramatic, the obvious effect, maybe think about the invisible choruses in your own world. What are the subtle enhancements, the quiet improvements, maybe in your work, maybe just in life, that you might be overlooking?
Good question.
How often are the most powerful changes the ones that just weave themselves into the background, making everything else subtly better, rather than the ones making all the noise? Maybe it's worth considering the power of elegant subtlety. It could be that secret ingredient that just makes everything feel, well, more present, more right. Something to think about.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are getting into the tech behind what might be one of the most celebrated pedal reissues ever, the BOSS DC2W Dimension C.
Oh, this is a great one because the DC2W, it's not just a pedal, right? It's really It's like a time capsule, an engineering lesson.
A lesson, yeah. We're talking about a whole lineage here.
Yeah.
It goes all the way back to the Roland SDD 320 Dimension D. That was a rack unit from, what, 1979?
Yep, 79. And then that led to the original compact BOSS DC2 pedal in 1985.
So our mission today is pretty simple. We want to figure out why this specific effect, the dimension effect, has this like sacred status.
Right.
Because when you say modulation, most people, they think of a swirly chorus or a flanger.
Right.
But this thing is called a spatial enhancer.
And that's the whole ballgame. That's the difference. To put it simply, dimension processing is all about stereospatial enhancement. It uses this complex multi-voice modulation, but, and this is the key, with a fixed LFO topology.
Okay, fixed topology. Let's break that down.
It's the secret sauce. It's engineered specifically to give you this massive width and depth without all the stuff people hate about chorus.
Before we dig into the engineering side, let's just touch on the Wazacraft thing. For anyone listening who might not know what that means, what does that label from BISS really signify?
It's really important context. Waza is a Japanese term. It means art and skill. And these pedals, they aren't just reissues.
No.
They're meticulously re-engineered, often hand-built in Japan. They use the original analog circuitry, but they pair it with, modern precision and reliability.
Mm-hmm.
So the W in DC2W is BOSS basically saying, this is it. This is the perfected version.
Okay, so let's get into the anti-chorus idea, because that's where the magic is. Why would a studio in the 80s pay thousands for a huge rack unit like the STD 320 when chorus pedals were, cheap and everywhere?
They were paying to avoid the seasick factor. That's what it comes down to.
A wobble.
Exactly. A traditional chorus works by duplicating your signal and then modulating the pitch and delay time with an LFO, a low-frequency oscillator.
Right, and an LFO is basically just a slow, cyclical waves that controls how much that pitch shifts.
You got it. And that constant movement, that wave, introduces a really audible, detuned pitch wobble. It's great for shimmer sometimes, but it can just wash out your tone. It can just sound muddy in a mix.
So the dimension process avoids that.
Completely. Because of its fixed LFO topology, you get zero detuned pitch wobble, zero obvious LFO sweep, and so zero swirl. It just sounds stable.
So if it's not swirling or detuning,
Yeah.
how does it get that 3D spatial thing? What does it actually sound like?
The sources all describe it as subtle, which is key, but also incredibly powerful. It just takes your signal and makes it thick, wide, and polished.
Polished, that's a good word for it.
Yeah, it enhances your guitar's natural tone. It doesn't mask it. It sort of wraps your sound in this beautiful stereo field instead of competing with it.
I think my favorite description I found was that it feels like a studio polish button. That just nails it.
Right. It really does. It's like instant mastering for one track. And that smoothness comes from the architecture. The signal path is all analog, which keeps it warm, but it uses digital precision to control the stability.
So it's a hybrid.
In a way, yeah. It's a faithful recreation of that original stereo modulation matrix, but with really stable fixed rate delays. And that fixed rate is what keeps the pitch perfect. No warbling.
And that balance analog heart, digital brain, that's kind of the Wazacraft calling card. Which brings us to the DC2W's biggest feature. It's not one sound, it's two.
This is why it's the definitive version. You get two different engines in one pedal. The S mode, that's standard mode, and it gives you the sound of the original 1985 BOSS DC2 compact pedal.
And the other mode.
The C's mode, custom mode, that replicates the huge studio-grade sound of the Roland SDD 320 Dimension D rack unit.
Okay, let's talk about the controls, because this is the elephant in the room.
Uh-huh.
It has no knobs, just 4 big preset buttons. And for a lot of players, that idea zero tweakability is just infuriating.
It's a huge point of friction for some people, yeah. But the thinking behind it, the answer is, yes, it's worth it. The designers basically decided that the absolute best, most musical settings were in these fixed, perfectly tuned increments. You don't need to find the sweet spot because they already found it for you 8 times over.
8 times. You can combine the buttons, right?
Absolutely. You get 4 bass settings with the 4 buttons, but then you can press, say, button 1 and button 3 at the same time.
And that gives you a different sound.
A totally different, unique mode. So that gives you 8 modes for the S engine and 8 more for the C engine. You're not just turning it on, you're adding layers of depth and width that are preset to sound great.
So let's get specific on the tones. The S mode versus the C mode. What am I actually hearing when I switch between them?
The S mode, the DC2 pedal sound, it's warmer, a bit subtler. It has that classic compact pedal voice, a little more mid-range focus. It just feels really good for guitar.
And the C mode. The big rack unit sound.
That's where you get that pristine, high-fidelity studio sound. The C mode is designed to be wider, cleaner, more open and airy. It's that super polished, almost invisible effect that just makes everything sound expensive.
I see. So you'd use them for different things.
Totally. S for a focused, warm dimension, and C for that huge, sprawling, pristine width.
And what about the button progression? It's not like going from 0 to 100, right?
It's not at all. It's like painting in layers. Button 1 is almost nothing, just a little bit of thickening. You almost don't notice it until you turn it off.
Okay.
Button 2 adds some clean, noticeable width. Button 3, that's where you start to feel the depth. It gets really three-dimensional. And button 4 is max dimension, super wide, super lush, but still completely stable.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting for me. That stability. The fact that it doesn't detune the pitch.
Yeah.
That's why it's so versatile, right? It's not just a guitar pedal.
That's the critical point. Most modulation pedals, you hit them with high gain or you try them on a bass guitar.
And they sound awful.
They just fall apart. But because the Dimension C doesn't introduce that wobble, you can use it on almost anything.
Okay, so clean electric guitar.
Huh.
That's a no-brainer. It's world-class for that ambient shimmer.
For sure. But think about overdriven guitar, a heavy rock rhythm track. You want it to be huge, but tight.
Right.
A normal chorus would just turn that into a warbly mess. But the Dimension C just adds stereo width without blurring the distortion. It makes the track sound wider, not wetter.
Wider, not wetter. That's a great way to put it. Okay, and what about bass? The sources all say it's amazing on bass.
Because the low end doesn't forgive pitch modulation, it just sounds awful. The DC2W adds this clean, stable dimension that lets the bass fill out the stereo field without sounding, loose or fighting the kick drum.
And then there's the studio history. The SDD320 was everywhere on synths and keys, but its most legendary use, that was on vocals.
Oh, absolutely. The Dimension D rack unit defined the vocal sound of so many hits in the 80s and 90s. It gives you this subtle stereo widening that's just impossible to get otherwise. And you can still do that, route the DC2W externally, and you can get that same iconic sound on a dry vocal track.
So this thing really is less of a guitar pedal and more of a production tool that just happens to come in a pedal format.
But precisely. It works on everything because its job isn't to transform the sound. It's to enhance it. It respects the original signal.
So let's just recap the historical weight here. You have the 79 rack unit that defined a generation of studio sounds. Then the 85 pedal became this rare cult classic.
And super expensive on the used market. It had this whole mystique around it. The DC2W is the first time BOSS brought both of those legendary circuits, the pristine rack and the warmer pedal, into one modern, reliable box. It really brought that sound to everybody.
Okay, so let's do the final checklist for the listener. The pros and the things you really need to consider.
The pros list is long. You get two classic algorithms, the DC2 and the STD320, in one pedal. It's ultra stable, zero pitch wobble, amazing stereo depth, and it works on pretty much any instrument you can throw at it.
And the simple controls are a pro if you like that sort of thing.
Right, 8 perfect sounds right out of the box.
So what are the considerations, the cons, if you want to call them that?
Well, there are limitations by design. First, no variable controls. If you're a tweaker, this pedal will drive you crazy.
Yep.
Second, it is subtle. If you want a heavy, sweeping chorus, this is absolutely not the pedal for you. And finally, the most important one, you really need a stereo rig to get the full effect.
It works in mono, but the magic is in stereo.
The magic is 100% in the stereo width. Dual amps, headphones, a stereo interface. That's where you hear what it's really doing.
So wrapping it all up, the DC2W Dimension C is celebrated because it does something no traditional chorus really can.
Yeah.
It delivers this polished, musical spatial enhancement without any of the engineering compromises. It just enhances your tone.
Which leaves you with a really interesting question to think about, right? Given that the whole point of this effect is to enhance without changing the core sound, without that pitch conflict, does that make it the purest form of modulation? Is it just amplifying the musicality that's already there?
A great thought. What other effects are out there that have such a huge impact while being almost invisible?
Exactly. Something for you to chew on.
And that's all the time we have for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in and really exploring a piece of music tech history that's just, it's everywhere. So foundational. You might not even clock how much it defines, modern recorded sound.
Absolutely. We're talking about the lineage of Probably the most famous modulation pedal ever created.
Huh.
The Boss SS Chorus Ensemble, CE series.
Exactly.
And it's a great deep dive because the CE line, it's not just like a random bunch of pedals. It's more like a dynasty, isn't it? Spanning almost 50 years now.
50 years. Wow.
Yeah, and this series has pretty much always defined what it means to add that dimension, movement, that lushness we just call chorus.
Right. That's
If you listen to, say, late 70s new wave or 80s pop, even modern indie rock,
Yeah.
and you hear a guitar or maybe a synth, maybe even a bass line that just sounds bigger, wider, deeper than it feels like it should. Chances are you're hearing some CE DNA in there somewhere. It's just baked into the sound of popular music.
So our mission today isn't just to, list the models off. We want to actually walk you through that whole lineage chronologically. Start with the big one, the CE1, and go right up to the CE20 multifunction thing.
And track the sound, yeah. But also the design choices BOS made along the way. And critically, those big shifts in the circuits, that whole analog versus digital thing.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Huge. And how the line specialized, for guitar, sure, but then for bass, even 5-string bass.
The whole journey just feels like a lesson in how a company tries to balance, tradition with pushing things forward.
Definitely. Okay, let me unpack it then. Start right at the beginning. 1976. The legend.
Right. Part 1. Establishing that analog benchmark, CE1, CE2, CE3.
Let's do it.
So the CE1 Chorus Ensemble, 1976. This wasn't just another chorus pedal hitting the market.
No way. It was the first standalone chorus pedal you could buy as, a floor unit.
Right. And BSS wasn't just tweaking an existing stompbox idea. They were actually porting over a circuit from a really famous amp, weren't they?
They were. The CE1 is legendary, partly because it's basically the chorus and vibrato circuit ripped straight out of the Roland JC120 Jazz Chorus amp.
Ah, the Jazz Chorus.
Yeah.
Iconic.
Totally. That amp came out just a bit earlier, 75, I think, and it already set this new standard for clean tones, mainly because of that built-in stereo chorus. So the CE1 just took that engine and put it in its own box.
Making it accessible to anyone, whatever amp they used.
Exactly. And that box defined that spatial, kind of lush ensemble sound. It's right there in the name.
Looking at the thing, though, the architecture, the format, it looks like a tank compared to later BOSS pedals. Why so big? And it needed its own power cord, right?
Yeah, that huge enclosure, the AC power. It was absolutely necessary back then. We're talking pure analog circuitry inside. And those early BBD chips, they needed space and, crucially, stable power.
BBD. Okay, let's break that down.
Right, the bucket brigade device. That's the heart of pretty much all vintage analog delay and modulation effects. Think of it literally like a line of tiny capacitors, buckets. The audio signal gets sampled, that's the water, and then passed down the line of buckets by a clock signal. That's the brigade.
Gotcha. Like passing buckets down a fire line.
Exactly. And by messing with the speed of that clock signal, usually with an LFO, a low-frequency oscillator, you change how long it takes the signal to get to the end. That tiny, constantly changing delay time, that's chorus.
And the warmth people talk about with analog, where does that come from?
That's kind of the beauty of the imperfection. Every time the signal sample jumps from one bucket to the next, you lose a tiny bit of high-frequency detail. Plus, the clock signal itself introduces a very subtle noise floor. It's not perfectly clean like digital.
So it's dimensional, a bit colored.
Yeah, dimensional, maybe slightly noisy, but in a way that musicians often find really pleasing, really musical. Digital chorus is clean, precise. Analog BBD chorus just has this swirl.
And the CE1's modulation was kind of unique too, wasn't it? Something about the LFO waves.
Yeah, this is a neat detail. It used a triangle wave for the main chorus sound. But then if you switched it over to its dedicated vibrato mode, it used a sine wave instead.
What's the difference in sound between a triangle and a sine wave for modulation?
Well, a triangle wave goes up and down linearly, right? Smooth, symmetrical pitch change. Great for chorus because it adds that shimmer without sounding too warbly or seasick.
Okay.
A sine wave is smoother at the top and bottom of its curve, but can actually sound like a more pronounced pitch bend when you apply it to delay time. So for the vibrato mode, which on the CE1 was only the modulated signal, no dry sound mixed in BSS wanted that definite pitch wobble. The sine wave gave it that almost like a rotary speaker vibe.
Ah, so it had true vibrato, not just chorus set to max.
Exactly. That dual mode thing, driven by different LFOs, gave it a versatility most later compact pedals just couldn't match.
Plus the I/O mono in, but stereo out. That was pretty revolutionary for a floor pedal back then, right? Giving you that big dimensional stereo image.
Oh, absolutely. Running the dry signal out one side and the wet modulated signal out the other, that stereo spread is what cemented its sound in the late 70s, early 80s. Think about recording that instant width.
And the controls were pretty comprehensive, too.
Yeah, input sensitivity, level, chorus intensity, then separate vibrato, depth, and rate, plus the foot switches for bypass and switching between chorus and vibrato. It was like a mini console on the floor.
It definitely set the template,
Right.
sonically, functionally, but there were downsides that obviously pushed BioSS towards the next thing.
For sure. It was massive, heavy, AC power only, which was a hassle. And, compared to later stuff, it definitely had a higher noise floor. Partly the circuit complexity, partly just the nature of those early BBDs and clock circuits.
Oh, a masterpiece, but kind of an unwieldy one, maybe more suited for the studio or a fixed stage rig.
Precisely.
Right.
Which leads us directly to its much, much smaller sibling.
A CE2, 1979. The compact revolution begins.
Yeah, the CE2 was Bolas basically saying, okay, the CE1 sounds amazing, but musicians need something practical. Touring musicians, guys playing clubs, they needed something that fit on a pedal board and ran off a battery.
So the engineering challenge must have been pretty huge.
Yeah.
Cramming that CE1 magic into this standard Bar-S compact box.
Enormous. And they had to make some serious sacrifices to do it.
The big one being stereo, right?
Yeah.
They went mono only.
Yeah.
That seems like a massive step back, losing the CE1's killer feature.
It was a huge trade-off, yeah. But you have to remember the context. For most guitarists in '79, just having chorus in a small battery-powered stomp box was the main thing. The market was screaming for compact pedals.
Practicality won out.
It did, so they stripped it down. Just rate and depth knobs, mono in, mono out, no separate vibrato mode, all sacrificed to fit the board, run on 9 volts.
Speaking of 9 volts, didn't the early CE2s use that weird ACA power adapter? That's a potential pitfall for vintage buyers, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the ACA thing. Good point. Early Bot-House compacts used the ACO standard. It was
Right.
center positive, usually 12 volts, unregulated.
Which is the opposite of modern power supplies.
Right. Inside the pedal, there was circuitry designed to take that 12V and filter it down to the 9V the circuit needed, sometimes even less for the BBD chip. Worked fine with the right ACA adapter or a battery. But if you plugged a modern standard 9V center negative supply, like the PSA type, into an ACA pedal.
You wouldn't work properly or sound weird.
Exactly. It wouldn't get the voltage it expected for that internal filtering stage, so it would often sound starved, noisy, or just not work at all. You either need the right adapter, a daisy chain setup that handles the voltage drop, or a mod. It catches people out.
Okay, so technically complex, even in its simplicity. But the sound, still analog BBD, right? Often that famous MN3000-7 chip in the early ones.
Yes, and that's key. That MN3007 chip, combined with how BOS voiced the circuit around it, gave the CE2 that sound. Lush, but somehow tighter than the CE1. Definitely known for being warm, really musical modulation.
Warmer or maybe darker than later BBDs.
Often, yeah. That's the perception. The MN3007 just had this character. And that voicing became the sound of BOSS chorus. It's probably one of the most recorded chorus sounds in history.
Why do you think it hit so hard?
It just struck a perfect balance, didn't it? Complex enough to add real dimension and richness, but so simple to use just 2 knobs. You could dial in a great sound instantly. Think The Cure, The Police, those clean, textured rhythm sounds that's often a CE2.
So the mono workhorse. But people still miss the stereo.
They did, which inevitably led to the next step, bringing stereo back to the compact format. Enter the CE3 starting around 1982.
Right, the successor, bridging the gap, still compact, still analog BBD,
Yeah.
though now we're often talking about a different chip, the MN3207.
Yeah, the MN3207 is commonly associated with the CE3. And the big news was mono input, but dual outputs. Stereo was back on the menu for compact users.
And they added that mode switch. What did that actually do? It wasn't just splitting the signal, was it?
No, it was cleverer than that. You still had rate and depth, but the mode switch gave you options. Mode, I was typically the classic setup. Dry out of output A, wet chorus out of output B, maximum stereo width.
Like the CE1's stereo out.
Exactly. But the other mode, often mode 2, did something different. It kept the dry signal in both outputs, but sent the wet chorus signal out of phase between A and B.
Out of phase. What does that achieve?
When those 2 signals combine, especially if your amps aren't panned super wide, it creates this really deep, almost 3-dimensional swirling effect. It gives you a sense of depth and movement that's also quite mono-compatible, which can be useful. It wasn't just about width. It was about adding this complex internal movement.
Okay, so more versatile for different setups.
Yeah.
But sonically, people often say the CE3 sounds different from the CE2. Brighter, maybe sharper. Why would that be if both are analog BBD?
That perceived difference often gets pinned on that chip change, from the CE2's MN3007 to the CE3's MN3207. The MN3207 was a newer design, intended for lower voltage operation, maybe a bit higher fidelity, cleaner.
Cleaner equals brighter.
Often, yeah. It might have slightly leaner low mids compared to the CE2. Some players feel it lost a tiny bit of that thick, syrupy warmth of the CE2. But the flip side is that slightly brighter, perhaps more articulate voice really excelled in stereo.
How so?
It sparkled beautifully when you pan the outputs wide, perfect for those clean, arpeggiated parts or funk rhythms where you want the effect to cut through the mix without muddying up the low mids where the bass and kick drum live.
So CE2, warm, classic mono. CE3, brighter, stereo-focused, maybe a bit more surgical, definitely paving the way for more specialized sounds to come.
Exactly, and that leads us right into the next phase where specialization really takes over.
Part 2. Specialization and the digital crossover. We're talking CE2B for bass, the pivotal CE5, and then the CEB3, another bass one.
Right. The late 80s, early 90s, the effects market is booming, and BAU SS starts tailoring the CE sound.
First up, the CE2B from 87, clearly aimed at bass players. Why did bassists need their own chorus?
Well, bassists were using effects more, but standard guitar chorus circuits often just don't work well on bass. The modulation, especially on the lower notes, it can make everything sound muddy, indistinct. It can kind of rob the bass of its fundamental punch.
Yeah, that low-end warble is killer for the rhythm section.
Totally. So the CE2B was essentially a CE2 circuit, but voiced differently, tuned to be less aggressive on the low frequencies, trying to keep that fundamental solid.
But the really key addition was that third knob, wasn't it?
Absolutely crucial. The effect level control. A mix knob. This was huge for bassists. It let you blend the amount of chorus signal, the wet, with your original clean bass tone, the dry.
So you could get the shimmer on top, but keep the solid low end underneath.
Precisely. Dial in just enough effect to add movement or width, maybe for sustained notes or chords on bass, without sacrificing that essential punch and clarity that anchors the band.
Makes total sense for bass.
They go.
Guitarists started grabbing them too, didn't they?
They did, because they realized, hey, this is basically a CE2, but with a mix control. If you wanted the CE2 sound, but found it sometimes washed out your core tone a bit too much in a busy mix.
You could just dial back the effect level knob on the CE2B a touch?
Exactly. Maybe run it 70% or 80% wet. It gave guitarists that extra degree of control the original CE2 lacked, kind of a secret weapon for subtle chorus.
So great for bass, useful for guitarists wanting a blend, still mono only though, like the CE2, and maybe voiced a bit less sparkly than the CE3 or the next one up.
Right. Warmth and low mid definition were the priorities for the bass version, not so much high-end shimmer. Which brings us to 1991 and a pedal that really changed the game, the CE5.
Ah, the CE5. Still in production today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Often called the studio engineer's CE. Why that nickname?
Because it introduced maximum flexibility, especially in tone shaping. It kept the level, rate, and depth knobs, but the big innovation was the filter section.
Not just a simple tone knob.
No, a dual filter system, independent high-cut and low-cut filters. This was totally new for a compact chorus. It gave you surgical control over which frequencies the chorus effect actually hit.
So you could really tailor the sound, make it dark like a CE2 or bright and modern.
Exactly. Roll off the highs with the high cut, roll off the lows with the low cut. You could mimic older voicings, or, crucially for mixing, you could use the low-cut filter to keep the chorus completely off your lower guitar strings. Let them ring out clean and punchy while only the higher strings shimmered.
Ah, so keeping the mud out of the bass and kick drum range in a mix. That is an engineer's dream.
Totally. It transformed the chorus from just a general wash into a really precise tool.
That alone makes it a huge step. But the CE5 is also where the big internal change happens. The whole analog versus digital thing really comes to a head here, doesn't it?
This is where it gets interesting and maybe confusing for buyers. For roughly the first 10 years, 91 to about October 2001, the CE5 was analog. It carried on that BBD lineage using chips like the MN3207 or similar ones.
Okay, so far so good. Still analog.
But then, around late 2001, BOSS quietly transitioned the CE5 circuit over to digital signal processing, DSP.
Wait, seriously. Same pedal name, same knobs on the outside, but a completely different engine inside.
Yep, fundamentally different. They likely did it for consistency, lower noise floor, maybe cost and parts availability. Digital chips solve a lot of analog
But
problems.
how did it sound? Did players notice?
Oh, the tone purists definitely notice. The digital versions are crystal clear, dead quiet, very reliable, but many players felt they lacked that certain something, that dimensionality, the slight randomness, the warmth, the character of the BBD chips.
The analog mojo.
Pretty much. As a result, those pre-2001 analog CE5s are now highly sought after by collectors. You have to check serial numbers or sometimes the LED color to know which version you're getting.
Wow, so the CE5 isn't just one pedal, it's two pedals in the same box, depending on when it was made. It bridged the gap from analog to digital within its own production run.
Exactly. It represents that critical fracture point in the lineage. Analog legacy on one side, digital consistency on the other. Huge significance.
Okay, let's quickly cover the other specialized pedal from this era, the CEB3 bass chorus from 1995. How did this differ from the earlier CE2B?
The CEB3 was a much more sophisticated approach to bass chorus than just adding a mix knob. It was designed specifically to address the low-frequency clarity issue in a more advanced way.
Ow.
Its defining feature is a split-frequency crossover design. This is way beyond just blending wet and dry.
Okay, crossover. What does that mean in this context?
It means the pedal internally splits the bass signal into two frequency bands. The low filter knob doesn't just cut lows from the effect, it actually sets the point where that split happens.
Okay. So you set a frequency.
Right, let's say you set it at 100 hertz. Everything below 100 hertz bypasses the chorus effect completely. It stays 100% dry, solid, punchy, fundamental. Only the frequencies above 100 hertz actually get sent to the chorus circuit to be modulated.
That's brilliant for bass, especially extended range basses.
Absolutely essential for 5 or 6 string players. You need that low B string around 30 hertz to be rock solid. The CEB3 ensures the chorus only adds shimmer and movement to the mids and highs, leaving the foundation completely untouched.
So it's engineered for maximum clarity in the mix. Protects the low end perfectly.
Exactly. Perfect for modern pop, rock, funk, anywhere you need that bass to be clear and powerful, but maybe you want a little harmonic richness on top.
The trade-off, maybe, is that it sounds very precise, very clean, because of that design. Not as warm or washy as the older CE2B, perhaps.
That's probably fair. It's less about a syrupy vintage wash and more about surgically adding chorus where it works best for bass without compromising the low end. Precision is the goal.
Got it. Okay, that covers the specialization and the digital shift. Now let's move into the modern era, where BiSS seems to be looking both backwards and forwards.
Right. Part 3, tributes and workstations. We're talking the CE2W Wazacraft and the CE20.
First, the CE2W Wazacraft from 2016. What's the deal with the Wazacraft line?
Wazacraft is BOSS, basically flexing its muscles, showing respect for its own legacy. Waza means art and technique in Japanese. These pedals are made in Japan, often revisiting classic, iconic circuits, but rebuilding them with premium components, modern refinements, lower noise, kind of the best of both worlds.
And the CE2W is clearly an homage to the early analog CEs, right? It looks like a CE2.
It is. It's an all-analog pedal using BBDs, designed to capture the magic of the originals, but in one box and with improvements. It's buoyant because it basically houses the most sought-after vintage CE voices.
Which one specifically?
It has a mode switch. In standard mode, it's designed to be the definitive CE2 sound, that warm, lush mono chorus.
So wait, didn't you say the original CE2 was mono only?
It was, but here's the Waza refinement. The CE2W's standard mode adds stereo output capability. So you get the CE2 voicing, but with the stereo spread, the original lacked.
Nice. Best of both worlds there. What about the other mode?
Flip the switch to CE1 mode, and it aims to replicate the original 1976 legend. You get both the wide stereo chorus and that unique sine wave vibrato circuit from the CE1.
Wow, so it's got the CE2 and the CE1 sounds covered. Any other refinements compared to the originals?
Yes, a couple of key ones. Remember how the original CE1's vibrato depth was fixed? The CE2W's CE1 mode adds variable depth control for the vibrato, which is a big improvement in usability.
Oh, looks handy.
And critically, the noise floor is significantly lower than the vintage units. They use modern BBDs, better filtering, careful circuit layout, all while keeping the core analog signal path intact.
So for someone who loves those vintage analog CE sounds, the CE2 warmth, the CE1's big stereo and vibrato, but wants modern reliability, lower noise, stereo output, and a compact size, the CE2W is pretty much the answer.
It's Arguably the definitive modern analog CE reference box, celebrates the legacy beautifully.
Okay, so that's the loving analog tribute. Now let's swing completely the other way to the digital realm with the CE20 chorus ensemble. This one's discontinued now, right?
Yeah, it ran from about 2005 to 2011. It was part of Boss's larger twin pedal series, bigger footprint, more controls. And if the CE2W was about perfecting analog history, the CE20 was the all-in-one digital chorus workstation.
Purely digital multi-algorithm.
Yeah.
Meaning it wasn't trying to be a BBD circuit. It was using processing power to model different sounds.
Exactly. Focused on breadth, flexibility, programmability, stuff that digital does really well.
So what kind of sounds did it model? Did it do the CE1?
It did. It had a CE1 model, but crucially, it also modeled the legendary Roland STD320 Dimension D.
Ooh, the Dimension D. That's a different beast entirely, isn't it? More subtle.
Totally different. The Dimension D is a famous studio rack unit, highly prized. It creates width and depth using more complex phase manipulation and multiple delay lines rather than the obvious pitch modulation of a BBD chorus. It's often described as more spacious, less effecty, just makes things sound bigger.
So the CE20 having both the CE1 and the Dimension D models, it's pretty significant, covers a lot of ground.
Huge. Plus, it had dedicated modes optimized for bass and acoustic guitar. 6 modes in total, massive versatility.
And being digital, I assume it had more controls than the compact pedals.
Way more. Beyond rate and depth, you had parameters like brilliance to control the high-frequency content of the effect, and ambience to add a sort of reverb-like space. Really detailed tweaking available.
Plus presets, right. That's a big advantage of digital for live use.
Yep. Stored 4 user presets. You could dial in your CE1 sound, your Dimension D sound, maybe a bass sound, and recall them instantly with your foot. Super practical for stage work.
So the ultimate flexible chorus box for its time. The trade-offs being the larger size, the digital architecture, maybe not the same feel as the analog units for some players.
That's the usual debate. Incredible flexibility and clean operation versus that arguably more organic dimensional feel of the analog BBD circuits. And of course, it's discontinued, so you'd be looking on the used market.
Okay, that brings us pretty much up to date. Let's try and synthesize all this. Part 4. Key takeaways.
Yeah, looking back at the whole timeline, you really see BOSS responding to needs, solving problems step by step.
It's like they started with the big statement piece, the CE1, defining the sound.
But realized immediately, okay, this is too big, too power hungry. So boom, CE2 solves the format problem, even if it meant losing stereo for a bit.
Then the CE3 brings stereo back to the compact world.
Then the CE5 adds that crucial studio-level filtering control.
While the CE2B and CEB3 tackle the specific needs of bass players, getting progressively smarter about preserving the low end.
Then the CE2W looks back and says, let's perfect those original analog sounds with modern tech.
And the CE20 looked forward, embracing digital to offer maximum variety and programmability. It's a really clear evolutionary path.
It is. You can map it. CE1 established the BBD stereo chorus vibrato. CE2 made it compact mono. CE3 restored compact stereo. CE5 added filters. CE2B, CEB3 specialized for bass, blend crossover. CE2W unified the analog legends. CE20 went wide with digital modeling.
And let's nail down that analog versus digital divide one more time, because it's probably the most important distinction for anyone buying one of these.
Okay, simple breakdown. CE1, CE2, CE2B, CE3, all definitely analog BBD.
Right.
CE5 is the tricky one. Analog from 91 to about late 2001, digital after that. Need to check.
Got it.
CEB3, primarily known for its crossover function, likely exists in both analog and digital forms depending on era, but the function is key. CE2W, modern, pure analog Wazacraft. CE20, fully digital workstation.
That split, especially around the CE5, really shows the tension, doesn't it? Between the desirable character of the old tech and the clean convenience of the new.
Totally. And the fact that the CE2W exists and that vintage analog CEs command high prices proves that even with perfect digital modeling available, that BBD sound, its warmth, its dimension, maybe even its slight flaws, still hold a special appeal for a lot of musicians.
Okay, so for you listening, trying to figure out which CE might be right for you, let's do a quick use case guide based on everything we've discussed.
Sounds good. So if you want that classic, thick, kind of dark vintage chorus shimmer and you're mostly playing mono, the CE2 is your icon, especially the early ones with the MN3007 chip, if you can find one.
If you need that classic stereo swirl, but in a compact pedal, the CE3 is a solid choice, maybe a touch brighter. Or, for the best of both worlds, CE2 warmth plus modern stereo, the CE2W in standard mode is the top contender today.
Needs surgical control in the studio or a dense live mix. That points towards the CE5 specifically for those high and low cut filters. Make sure you know if you're getting analog or digital if that matters to you.
And for bass players, if you want simple warmth with a blend control, the CECB is great. But for modern clarity, especially with 5+ string basses, the CEB3's crossover design is pretty much indispensable for protecting those low notes.
And finally, if you just want maximum versatility, loads of different chorus and modulation flavors, including that Dimension D sound, plus presets for live use. The digital CE20, if you can find one used, was built for that job.
What a journey. From that massive AC-powered box in '76 to digital workstations and meticulous analog recreations decades later, the CE line really did invent the standalone chorus, didn't it? And then just kept refining it.
Yeah, constantly balancing that original ensemble sound tradition with whatever the next innovation was. Smaller size, stereo, filters, digital. It's a masterclass in staying relevant while respecting your roots.
It's cool how even when they went digital with the CE20, they still included models of their own classics like the CE1.
Yeah.
They always acknowledged that original blueprint.
They did. Okay, so here's something maybe I'll leave you thinking about.
Yeah.
Considering how clean, quiet, and flexible digital modeling got, like in the CE20, why do you think that old analog DBD sound, the sound of the CE1 and CE2, still has such a grip on players? Why pay premium prices for pedals that are technically noisier and less precise? Is it just nostalgia? Or is there something about the limitations of that analog tech? The slight imperfections, the way the clock noise interacts, the less than perfect filtering that actually adds to the musicality. Does that inherent analogness create a kind of dimensional swirl that perfect digital code struggles to replicate convincingly?
Is the magic partly in the flaws? That's a good one. Does digital precision sometimes feel sterile by comparison?
Something to ponder, maybe next time you hear that unmistakable chorus shimmer on a track or when you're plugging in your own modulation pedals.
Definitely food for thought. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Catch you next time.
You know, when you're listening to music, maybe a guitar track, maybe keys, and you hear that beautiful kind of watery shimmer sort of floats and expands, gives it this amazing depth, this movement.
Yeah, that lush, rich texture.
Exactly. It makes so many great tracks just breathe. You hear it constantly. But where did that sound, that iconic sound, actually start? Like, what was the first thing that gave musicians that magic?
That is precisely what we're getting into today. We're talking about the Boss CE1 Chorus Ensemble. It came out way back in 1976.
76, okay.
And this wasn't just, another pedal. It holds the distinction of being Boss's very first pedal ever.
Wow.
Yeah, a really groundbreaking piece of gear that basically set the stage for a whole family of effects.
Okay, this is already fascinating. So our mission today, then, is to really unpack the story of the CE1.
Right.
We're going to look at where it came from. I hear there's a link to a famous amp.
Oh, yeah. Direct link.
We'll dig into the tech inside it, how it actually worked.
The BBDs and all that.
Talk about the impact it had, across different genres, and really show you how this one box kind of kicked off this whole dynasty of chorus pedals that are still vital today.
Exactly.
So by the end of this, you'll have like a real shortcut to understanding a super important piece of music tech. Hopefully some surprising bits in there too.
And what's really interesting, especially when you think about Boss now, you picture those small, colorful stomp boxes, right?
Yeah, the compact ones.
Well, the CE1, totally different. It was this big, heavy thing, needed AC power, built into this chunky enclosure.
Not exactly pedal board friendly back then.
Not at all. But it was built like a tank, meant for serious studio work, serious stage use. It reflected the kind of hefty components inside. And despite that size, it just became absolutely legendary.
So if this CE1 was Boss's first pedal, where did that sound come from? It couldn't have just popped into existence.
No, absolutely not. You're right. To get the CE1, you actually have to look back 1 year earlier to 1975.
Okay.
That's when Roland released the JC120 Jazz Chorus Amplifier.
The Jazz Chorus. Okay, I know that one. Famous clean tone.
And famous for its amazing built-in stereo chorus effect. The Boss CE1 was... Well, it was literally derived directly from the chorus circuit inside that JC120.
No way.
Yeah, they basically extracted that really popular defining sound from the amp.
Ripped it out.
And put it into its own box. Made it available for anyone, not just people who bought the amp.
That is such a smart move. It's like taking the secret ingredient from a famous dish and just bottling it.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, okay, technically then, what was going on inside that box? What made this sound so special? How did the magic happen?
Well, the core of the CE1's magic, it really came down to its use of Bucket Brigade device chips. BBDs.
MBBs, right? Heard of those?
Specifically the MN3002 chip in this case. Now, the way to think about a BBD chip is kind of like a tiny electronic conveyor belt.
Okay.
Imagine little buckets passing an electrical signal, your audio signal down the line, one bucket to the next really fast. This creates a very short delay, and it's an analog delay, so it sounds quite warm, quite natural.
Right.
Then, by subtly messing with the speed of that conveyor belt, modulating the delay time, making the buckets move faster or slower, and mixing that slightly delayed, slightly pitch-shifted signal back with your original dry signal, boom, that's your chorus. That shimmering, lush effect.
I see. So it's delayed signal plus original signal with the delay time constantly wiggling.
Exactly. And the CE1 had two main modes. You had the chorus, which was this really wide, almost three-dimensional stereo sound.
Stereo, okay.
Yeah, it works by creating these slightly detuned copies, makes it sound bigger, like more instruments playing. And then it had vibrato.
Different from chorus.
Yeah, simpler. Vibrato just bends the pitch of your sound up and down rhythmically, that wavering, almost seasick kind of sound.
Gotcha.
And you had basic controls, a rate knob for the speed of the wiggle.
Makes sense.
And a depth knob for how intense that wiggle was.
And had stereo outputs, you mentioned. That must have been a pretty big feature in the mid-'70s.
Oh, absolutely. Game-changing, really. Being able to send your dry signal, just your plain guitar sound, to one amp, and the wet signal, the one with the chorus effect, to another amp, that created this incredibly spacious, truly 3D soundstage that was just, well, it was groundbreaking then.
Yeah, I can imagine that separation really emphasizing the effect.
Totally amplified the width and depth. And yeah, AC powered only. It had a transformer built right in. That added to the weight, sure, but it also meant it was solid, dependable.
And the tone itself.
Yeah.
Besides the chorus effect.
Defined by that lush modulation, obviously, but also this real analog richness, very warm.
Yeah.
And like a lot of BBD circuits back then, it had a bit of hiss, some noise.
Ah, the famous analog noise floor.
Exactly. But for a lot of people, that wasn't even a negative. It added this organic, almost alive quality that early digital pedals really struggled to capture. It became part of its character, part of that vintage charm people still chase.
Okay, so the CE1 sets the stage. Big, heavy, analog pioneer, incredible sound derived from the JC120. But how did Boss go from that one success to basically building an entire empire of modulation effects that, actually fit on a normal pedal board?
Right. That's a great question. It's really a story of, well, shrinking things down and branching out.
Miniaturization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After the CE1, the next huge step for Boss was getting that core sound into a more practical package. So 1979 rolls around.
3 years later.
And they release the CE2 chorus. Now, this was huge. They managed to cram that amazing sound into their now iconic compact stompbox design, bright blue pedal.
Ah, the classic Boss look. Everyone knows that.
Totally. The CE2 was mono, not stereo like the CE1.
Okay, slight step back there.
In terms of outputs, maybe, but it kept that fundamental warm, lush character. And because it was small, affordable, reliable, it just exploded, became one of the most famous, most widely used chorus pedals ever. They basically democratized chorus, put it on everybody's pedal board.
Okay, so the CE2 is the one that really brought it to the masses.
Absolutely. And from there, things moved fast. 1982, they bring out the CE3 chorus.
What was new there?
Stereo outputs came back. It was actually the first compact Boss pedal to offer stereo chorus. Sonically, it was maybe a bit brighter, a little more hi-fi sounding than the CE2's warmth.
Interesting. Different flavors emerging.
Definitely. Then jump forward to 1991, you get the CE5 chorus ensemble. This one added high and low cut filters, giving you more control to shape the tone, make it fit better in a modern mix, maybe.
More tone shaping. Makes sense.
And crucially, Boss realized chorus wasn't just for guitarists or keyboard players. In 1992, they launched the CEB3 bass chorus.
Specifically for bass.
Yep. Optimized for lower frequencies, had filtering to keep the low end tight and clear while still giving you that rich modulation. So bass players got their dedicated version too.
That's a really clear path for the main CE line. But they didn't just stick to that, did they? I feel like Boss explored other avenues too, more modern stuff, different takes on chorus.
Oh, for sure. They didn't just rest on the classic CE sound. They kept innovating. And also, interestingly, revisiting their own history.
How so?
Well, take the CE20 Chorus Ensemble from 2001. That was a bigger unit, a twin pedal format.
Right, those double pedals.
It offered multiple different chorus sounds, including digital models, emulations of the original CE1 and the CE2. Much more programmable, more features, definitely aimed at studios or players needing lots of options.
Digital modeling enters the picture.
Exactly. But then, for players who really wanted that original analog warmth, but maybe with modern reliability, the CE2W Wazacraft came out in 2016.
Ah, the Wazacraft line. Premium stuff.
Exactly. And the CE2W is pretty special. It faithfully recreates the classic CE2 sound, but it also includes modes that replicate the CE1's unique chorus and its vibrato.
Whoa, so CE1 and CE2 sounds in one small pedal.
Yep, all in one compact Waza pedal, and with true stereo outputs too. It's a really significant modern take on their own legacy.
That's cool. And wasn't there also a whole separate dimension chorus thing going on? Different from the CE family.
Yes, good point. A totally distinct branch and really highly regarded, focused on a different kind of modulation, the DC2 Dimension C that came out in '85.
Dimension C.
It was famous for being incredibly subtle, really spacious stereo modulation, but without that obvious swirl or wobble you often get with chorus. It just adds this dimension, hence the name.
How did you control it?
Super simple, just 4 preset push buttons. You pick a dimension, no knobs.
Minimalist.
Very. That evolved into the DC3 Digital Dimension in '88, which was digital and actually did have adjustable controls. And just like the CE series, this dimension idea got the Waza treatment too.
Let me guess, DC2W.
You got it. DC2W Wazacraft, released in 2018. It's a faithful reissue of the DC2 with the button presets, but it also adds a second mode based on a sought-after Roland rack mount unit, the STD 320 Dimension D.
Wow, that's quite a family tree stemming from that original big CE1 box.
It really is. Shows how one really strong initial idea can just branch out and inspire so much variation.
So thinking about that original CE1, who were some of the artists who really grabbed onto that sound and made it iconic, put it on the map.
Oh man, the list is pretty impressive and diverse. Its sound just worked across so many genres. Andy Summers from The Police is probably one of the most famous users.
Right, that shimmering police guitar sound.
Absolutely. Signature CE1. Then you've got John Frusciante from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, used it tons on his clean tones.
Oh yeah, you can hear that.
Peter Hook Joy Division, New Order, used it on his bass. That high-up melodic bass playing with chorus became the sound of post-punk bass for many.
Definitely shaped their sound.
Tony Banks from Genesis used it on keyboards, creating these huge atmospheric soundscapes. Even someone like Steve Vai apparently used CE1 tones in his early setups for that depth.
That's a serious roster. Real heavy hitters across the board.
Totally.
So given that history, that impact, I'm guessing finding an original vintage CE1 today isn't exactly easy or cheap?
No, definitely not. Vintage CE1s are highly sought after. Collectors love them. Players who want that specific sound love them. They often go for premium prices.
Yeah, I bet.
And that's despite, the size, the AC power thing, and that characteristic BBD noise we mentioned, especially when you compare them to modern, super quiet digital pedals.
Right.
But that unique analog character, for many, it's still unmatched. The fact that there are so many clones and emulations, both analog pedals and digital plugins trying to capture the CE1 sound, that just tells you how foundational it was.
So someone who wants that vibe today,
Yeah.
but maybe doesn't want to hunt down or pay for a vintage one, you mentioned the Waza pedal.
Yeah, for getting closest to that original CE1 vibrato mode plus the classic CE2 chorus in a modern, reliable pedal,
Yeah.
the Boss CE2W Wazacraft is probably the go-to recommendation for many people.
Okay, good to know. So let's kind of pull this all together. After this deep dive, what's the big takeaway? What does the story of the Boss CE1 really mean for us as people who listen to and love music?
Well, the Boss CE1 Chorus Ensemble, it wasn't just Boss's first pedal. That's historically interesting, sure. But it was really the genesis, the starting point for an entire dynasty of chorus effects that fundamentally shaped how we think about guitar modulation, keyboard modulation.
Right.
Really for decades.
Right.
That warm analog bucket brigade sound, the lush stereo spread it offered, and knowing it came directly from the legendary Roland JC120 amp, it just set the gold standard. And even with its quirks, the size, the power cord, the noise, the CE1 is still this legendary piece of gear. It's prized by people chasing that original shimmering kind of unmatched character.
Yeah, this whole story really drives home how sometimes one single groundbreaking piece of gear
Yeah,
can just define a sound and set the bar for a whole industry, doesn't it?
absolutely.
And understanding where an effect like chorus comes from, its roots in something like the CE1, it definitely helps you appreciate all those layers and textures you hear in so many songs you love, whether it's guitar, keys, bass.
Gives you context.
Yeah, and it makes you think about the choices involved in making music tech back then, the trade-offs.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, how things that might have seemed like limitations at the time, like the CE1 being big or having that bit of noise,
Right.
how sometimes those very things, maybe paradoxically, end up contributing to a unique sound, a sonic character that becomes incredibly cherished later on.
That's a really interesting point.
It kind of leaves you with a thought, doesn't it?
Hmm.
What does it really take for one pioneering piece of gear to not just be innovative for its time, but to keep influencing new designs, keep inspiring artists almost 50 years down the line?
Yeah. What other firsts out there have had that kind of lasting, beloved impact, even with their initial quirks? Makes you think.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping on a pedal that really defined the sound of modern clean guitar for over 3 decades. I'm talking about the BOS CH1 Super Chorus. Now, if you listen to pretty much any track that needs that glossy, high-definition, shimmer, 90s pop, arena country, or those huge tones in contemporary worship music, you're hearing the sound of this little yellow box. It just cemented a legacy by being unapologetically clean and pristine.
And that clarity is really the whole point of our deep dive today. Our mission is to unpack the CH1's architecture and really get into a fundamental contradiction. How did this pedal become the essential modern sound, but still carry the name of its warmer, sort of darker vintage ancestors, like the CE1 and CE2?
Right.
And for you, the listener, we're uncovering this monumental secret that's kind of buried inside the model line. The CH1 isn't one pedal. It represents 2 completely distinct tonal eras. One is analog, one is digital. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how to spot the right CH1 for the sound you're after because they are not interchangeable.
Okay, so let's set the stage with the history first.
Yeah.
The CH1 Super Chorus came out way back in 1989. And this wasn't just a minor tweak of the CE2. It was a deliberate statement from BOS. The goal was to create something cleaner, brighter, just more high fidelity. They were actively pushing against that warm, lush, but maybe slightly dark and compressed chorus sound of the 80s.
Yeah, they wanted shine, not soup. That's a good way to put it.
Which brings us right to the most crucial insight about the CH1. If you're looking for one today, or maybe you have one from years ago, you have to understand this. BOSS did something extremely rare. They completely swapped out the core circuit architecture mid-production without changing the name. So you could own a CH1, but the DNA inside might be totally different from your friends.
Yeah, and what's wild is how seamless that transition was, at least to the casual buyer. But tonally, it fundamentally fractured the pedal's identity.
Yeah.
So let's break down that first era. This ran from 1989 up until about 2001. This was the analog CH1. And even though it was designed to be brighter than the CE series, it still used classic analog BBD chips, specifically the MN3007 with analog modulation and filtering.
Hang on, can we just pause there for a sec? BBD, for anyone who's not, deep in the weeds of circuit design, what are we actually talking about?
Of course, absolutely. BBD stands for Bucket Brigade Device.
Uh-huh.
And you can literally think of it like a chain of tiny buckets capacitors that pass the audio signal along one to the next. As the signal gets passed down this line, there's a tiny audible delay and a slight degradation or filtering of the high frequencies.
Huh?
And that process is what creates that signature analog warmth.
Yeah.
That slight compression, the subtle grain or warble in the repeats. It's the character of analog modulation. The early CH1 has that warmth baked right in, which makes its modulation feel smoother, a little more musical, even if it was aiming for brightness.
So then we hit the second era, post-2001, and everything changes. This is the modern version you'd buy in a store today. This was a complete paradigm shift. We moved to a purely digital DSP-based chorus.
Correct. DSP, digital signal processing. So instead of those physical buckets of electricity, the signal gets turned into digital data, ones and zeros. And then it's manipulated by a specialized chip. The modern CH1 uses high-quality 24-bit converters, which means the signal is processed with extreme fidelity. The result is a pedal that's just clean, incredibly bright, pristine clarity, the bass is tighter, and the high end just shimmers without any of that BBD graininess.
That's a huge distinction for anyone hunting for a specific sound. If you want that smooth, almost vintage feel, you need an analog one. And of course, those are now more expensive, more collectible.
Precisely. The analog units are prized for that subtle warmth. But the move to digital was a necessary step. That revision was what kept the pedal relevant as recording tech moved into the high-fidelity digital era of the 2000s. It ensured the CH1 delivered that hi-fi clarity everyone started demanding.
So despite this complete engine swap analog BBD versus digital DSP, the controls on the outside stayed exactly the same.
Yeah, which just speaks to how good the original interface was. You have your standards, E-level, which is your wet-dry mix, rate for the speed of the modulation, and depth for the intensity.
But compared to the old CE2, which only had 2 knobs, the CH1's defining feature has to be that fourth control, the EQ knob. This is the secret sauce. This is what allowed it to work in modern, dense mixes.
And it's so important to understand that the EQ knob doesn't touch your dry guitar signal. It only controls the high-frequency content of the wet modulated signal.
Which is brilliant.
It is brilliant engineering. If the chorus effect feels too bright or piercing, you just roll off the highs of the effect itself. But your dry tone, your fundamental note, stays perfectly clear and articulate. It stops the chorus from washing out your pick attack.
And when we talk about professional use, we have to bring up its secret weapon, the stereo output. This isn't just a second jack for convenience, it's a key part of the design.
That's absolutely right. When you run it in mono, you use output A. Simple enough. But when you plug into output B as well, you unlock what BOSS called its excellent stereo spread. So technically, output B carries a phase-inverted wet signal, which, for the listener, just means the modulation wave, the sweep, is perfectly mirrored but reversed between the two outputs.
So if the left amp's chorus is sweeping up in pitch, the right amp is sweeping down at the exact same time.
Exactly. And that opposition, that phase inversion, is what creates this massive three-dimensional spatial effect. When you run it through 2 amps or into a recording console, your brain interprets that opposing movement as incredible width and depth. It's a huge deal for ambient players or anyone who needs a truly punchy stereo field.
It really is the difference between a nice effect and a sound that just opens up the entire room. And of course, it's a standard BioSS pedal, 9-volt battery or a PSA adapter, and it's got a buffered bypass.
Which, that buffered bypass is actually a benefit in those big rigs. It keeps your signal strong, especially if you're running long cables to 2 different amps.
So let's synthesize all this. What's the signature sound we're listening for?
Well, whether it's analog or digital, the core of the CH1 is brightness. It's a sharp, shimmering chorus with high definition. Compared to a CE2, it has way less warmth. It's all about that crisp, tight low end and articulate high end. And that specific tonal profile is why it became the default choice for genres where clarity is just. It's non-negotiable. It completely dominated clean tones in pop and country. Think of those super clean, compressed Nashville tones where every instrument needs its own space. It's also the engine behind that classic wardrobe guitar shimmer, where that pristine top end and huge stereo spread are used to create these massive ambient layers of sound.
Yeah, I always think of that sound. The guitar steps on the pedal and the whole track just opens up. It's like clean glass shattering. It's not gooey or watery, it's transparent.
Precisely. And because of that high definition, it even found a home in technical genres like jazz and fusion, where complex chords need to maintain absolute clarity, which older chorus pedals could sometimes smear. That EQ knob and the tight low end ensure it doesn't step on the bass player's toes.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting functionally. The CH1 works so much better with drive pedals than its ancestors did. Those earlier analog CE pedals would often get messy, just indistinct when you put them after an overdrive. The modulation would just kind of collapse.
That's because the BBD chips introduce their own noise and compression, which just gets compounded by the distortion. But the CH1, especially the digital one, is way more forgiving. Its defined character, and that EQ knob let it work beautifully after an overdrive from modern modulation. It keeps everything articulated. So it became perfect for alternative rock, post-grunge, fusion. Anywhere you need that shimmer to cut through a wall of gain.
You get the drive tone, but the chorus doesn't turn into sonic mush.
Right. And that ability to sit cleanly post-drive is probably the single biggest reason it's still so relevant.
It can do the subtle, clean widening, but it can also handle the aggressive side of things for lead tones.
When you look back, The historical significance of the CH1 is just, it's huge. It was the technological bridge between classic analog chorus and the modern high-fidelity era. It became the default chorus for its time because it was reliable, affordable, and just so easy to fit in a mix. It gave producers what they wanted, articulation, not thick warmth. And its 30-plus year production run makes it one of the longest-lived BOSS pedals ever made.
That longevity really says it all. So let's just summarize the key takeaways for you, the listener. The pros are obvious. You get that unique EQ control for tailored brightness, a defined sound for clean or driven tones, and that incredible stereo spread. It's a workhorse.
But there are considerations. If you're a vintage purist, the modern digital version might sound too sharp, maybe even a bit sterile for you. It just doesn't have the thick warmth of a CE1 or CE2. And also, while the stereo mode is incredible, we have to admit that in monos, it can sometimes feel a bit narrower or thinner than a classic analog chorus. It was engineered for clarity, not for girth.
So ultimately, the CH1 sits in this really unique spot. It's cleaner and more hi-fi than its ancestors, but it's also proven to be more musical and versatile than a lot of other digital rivals that came later. It just delivers that brilliant shimmering modulation that enhances your signal without ever overwhelming it. So whether you decide to hunt down a collectible early analog one for that smooth grain, or just grab the modern digital version for pristine clarity, the CH1 is still a foundational choice. It's for any player needing a polished, mix-ready sound that fits right into a modern rig. It is, without a doubt, the sound of clean guitar from the last 3 decades.
And that leads us to a final thought for you to think about. The CH1 is the perfect example of how technology, moving from simple BBD circuits to sophisticated DSP chips, can fundamentally change the sound of a legendary product while keeping the name and the function exactly the same. We always focus on revolutionary new products, but the real mystery is often hidden in these evolutionary changes and things that have been around forever. So what essential long-running piece of gear in your own field, a camera lens, a software program, anything, might have had a similar secret technological transformation under the hood? And how has that quiet shift influenced how it performs today? Go look for those hidden changes.